I'm going to show you the Obturator Nerve Glide, and it's a half kneeling variation. So I've got this punching bag that I'm sitting on, which is the prop that I'm going to use to prop up my rear leg. So you're going to need something that can elevate your foot up off the ground. Remember, with all of our neuromechanic drills, it's really important that at first you maintain a stretch intensity of a 3 out of 10 and you don't go beyond that. Nerves don't like to be overstretched, so we want to be cautious at first. So to begin this, if I'm going to be gliding the obturator nerve on my right side, I'm going to start in a half kneeling position. I'm then going to take my rear foot and I'm going to place it on the prop behind me. From here, what we have to do is position the hip in the correct position to put tension on the nerve. So I also want to take my thigh and outwardly rotate it. So think about your lower leg as like a windshield wiper, and you're moving that windshield wiper inward. So now I have what's called external rotation of my femur. Okay? From there, I want a posterior pelvic tilt and some hip extension, meaning I move forward, and also abduction, meaning my femur moves away from me. And I want to make that movement without losing the pelvic positioning, and I want my pelvis to be pretty square, facing forward. Now from here, once I'm in this position, I'm already starting to feel some neural tension in this area here. So I'm pretty close to a 3, but I'm not there yet. I'm going to lengthen up through my spine and begin slumping forward, if I can, all the way to my lower back, without losing any of the other pieces that we've added to the sequence. Now I'm at a 3 out of 10 for intensity. I want to make sure my pelvis is still square. And from here, I'm going to move forward and backward with small, controlled little oscillations. I'll feel the tension increase as I move forward and decrease a little as I move back. Just really paying attention to making sure that I keep all those pieces of the sequence. Okay, so shake it out after some reps of that. Let's go into this again, and then I'll demonstrate a different driver. So start half kneeling. Outwardly rotate my femur. Get the pelvis underneath, little tuck of the pelvis, make sure it's square. I go forward for some hip extension, and then off to the side for some hip abduction. Lengthen up tall. Start the slumping process. Now I'm at my 3 out of 10. And this time, instead of small oscillations in a straight line, I can perform little hip circles. And as I do that, I'm just making sure that I don't lose those pieces of the sequence, especially the pelvic position. You can explore both directions. And then we'll relax and shake that one out. Finally, another great driver is from the pelvis, by tilting the pelvis both forwards and backwards. So let's set this up again. Rotate out, tuck the tail, lengthen up, go forward, off to the side, square the pelvis, lengthen up, slump. Okay, from here, I can explore what's called a posterior tilt of the pelvis, where I bring my belt buckle to my forehead, and then an anterior tilt, where I bring my belt buckle away from my forehead. When I go into the posterior tilt, I feel a lot of neural tension through this area. When I do the opposite, some of that tension decreases. The whole time, really working to keep all those pieces of the sequence together. Now I'm going to be targeting obturator nerve on my left side. So I've created a little bit more of an angle here so that you can see what the leg is actually doing, because it's a little bit tricky at times to see what the femur needs to do. So I've elevated my foot on the punching bag behind me. I'm in this half kneeling stance. From here, what I want to do is first position the leg correctly. So we need some outward rotation. So remember, lower leg's like a windshield wiper, and you're going to sneak it inward. That outwardly rotates my femur. This is the position that we want. From here, we also need hip abduction. So I need to rock forward a little bit so that my leg comes out to the side, and then make sure that I also have hip extension rather than leaving my pelvis behind me. I then set the pelvis in a posterior pelvic tilt. So I bring the belt buckle closer to my forehead, and this is the position that I want to maintain throughout the whole sequence. And I already am feeling neural tension or a neural stretch right through this area here. I lengthen up nice and tall, and I begin the slumping process, making sure that I don't lose the lower body components of this. Now I have my 3 out of 10 for intensity. And what I'm doing here to start is, while maintaining the pelvic positioning, I'm rocking forwards and backwards, and I'm kind of aiming towards the heel of my stance leg. So it's at a little bit of an angle. And as I rock forward, I can feel a gentle stretch sensation increase through that adductor region. And as I rock back, it decreases. Additional drivers. Remember, we said we could turn that into a hip circle. So as I'm in the position, I can coordinate little circles of the hip, and then I can also do both posterior and anterior tilts of the pelvis. Common mistakes that we see people running into with this. This is a position that a lot of people have trouble with, half kneeling, rear foot elevated, especially if they don't have the hip mobility. So if you get into this position and you're struggling to tuck your pelvis, you find that you're in this arched lower back position, or maybe an excessive anterior pelvic tilt. If you can't get out of this position, it's really hard to target the obturator nerve, because now you're not able to tension the inside front of the leg. So if you cannot get into that position, then what you would do is take your rear foot off of the prop. And you would actually work this from the ground. A lot of times people will be able to position things a little bit better. The last option is, if this is a challenging position for you because of the hip mobility, or you can't kneel for some reason, then you could do the exact same exercise, but you do a standing variation where you're putting the leg, say, on a bench or a chair, and you're balancing and standing on the other leg, and this will allow you to do exactly the same thing that you saw me do here.